Okay, so in the last video we discussed performing the actual compilation procedures, and now in this video we will begin our discussion of issuing and writing the accountant's compilation report. And this will be done over several videos, maybe 4 or 5 videos, because there's a lot of different intricacies and paragraphs and disclosures that we have to add for certain situations. This first video will talk about the overall general rules of the accountant's compilation report, and that gives us a list of all the items that we should include. And then there's certain things that we should include whenever we perform the compilation in accordance with a special purpose framework. We'll discuss that in the next video. And then there's some other disclosures we need to add when we're not independent of the entity. So remember, it's okay for us to be independent or to not be independent when we perform the compilation. We just need to disclose it. There also may be situations where the financial statements omit substantially all the disclosures that are required by the applicable financial reporting framework. So that's a departure from the financial reporting framework, and we need to disclose that. So we'll discuss that in another video as well. We also need to report any known departures from the applicable financial reporting framework, and we'll learn how to do that in another video. There also might be supplementary information that is included with the financial statement, so we need to report on that, and that'll be another video. And some more required supplementary information required by the financial reporting framework. And that would conclude our discussion of preparing the compilation report. So we see there's a lot of different intricacies to doing this beyond just a normal template. So we may need to add or remove several different paragraphs or disclosures depending on the circumstances of our engagement. So like I said, this first video is just going to be the general overview components of every compilation report, and then subsequent videos will discuss specific disclosures that we need to add. And so first here we see that the accountant's compilation report, it should be in writing, and it should also include a statement that management or the owners of the company are responsible for the financial statements. It should also identify the financial statements that have been subjected to the compilation engagement. It should also identify the entity whose financial statements have been subjected to compilation engagement. It should specify the date or period covered by the financial statements. It should include a statement that we performed the compilation engagement in accordance with SSARSs, which is promulgated by the Accounting and Review Services Committee of the AICPA. The report should also include a statement that we didn't audit or review the financial statements, nor were we required to perform any procedures to verify the accuracy or completeness of any of the information that management provided, and therefore we don't express an opinion or conclusion, nor provide any assurance on the financial statements. And we should also provide a signature on the report and include the city and state where we practice, and we should also include a date on the report, which is the date which we completed the procedures required by ARC Section 80. And so, as we see here, there's a lot of different things that we should add in our compilation report to help the users of the financial statements understand exactly what we did. And so we've got some explanatory material, so let's go down to that section and understand in more detail exactly what we're supposed to include in the accountant's compilation report. Okay, so now we're down in the explanatory material as it relates to the general inclusions in the accountant's compilation report. And it says that somehow our written report might become attached from the financial statement. So to minimize the possibility that the user of the financial statement doesn't infer any unintended level of reliance on the financial statements, then we may request that management include a reference on each page of the financial statements to the accountant's written report. So for instance, at the bottom, we'll usually see at the bottom of each of the financial statements something to the effect of see accountant's report or see accountant's compilation report. That way users of the financial statements will know that there's an accountant's report, and that if management forgot or didn't include the report with the financial statements, then the users of the financial statements would know that they need to ask for that potentially. Also, as far as our requirement to include the city and state where we practice, they tell us here that the city and state could be noted on the letterhead that from the office where we issued the accountant's compilation report. So we don't necessarily have to include the city and state somewhere else. For instance, you usually see it underneath the signature of the firm or the accountant, but we don't necessarily have to put that there if our letterhead has the city and state. And so this section ARC 80 includes some illustrative examples of the accountant's compilation report on financial statements. And so let's go down to Exhibit B here and take a look at some of the compilation report templates. That way we can see how all of these inclusions that we saw up in the requirements, the general inclusions, so we can see how they're structured and worded. So let's go down there now. All right, so now we're here at Exhibit B with illustrative examples of the accountant's compilation report on financial statements. And we see here we have a lot of different illustrations. And when we saw earlier in this video, there's a lot of different situations for which the accounts review report might be different by adding or removing certain disclosures. And that's why we have so many different illustrations here. This report is where the financial statements were prepared in accordance with GAAP. Here's one for the AICPA's financial reporting framework for small and medium-sized businesses. Here's one where they elected to omit all the disclosures. As we'll see, we're required to disclose when our independence is impaired, so there's an illustration for that. And this is when we decide to disclose what our impairment or the reason for our independence impairment is. And this one tells us the reason, or this is when we decide that we will disclose the reason. This is when we decide that we won't disclose the reason. And then here we have some where we have a departure from GAAP. And so let's just take a look at this first one here, the general normal, so to speak, compilation report for financial statements prepared in accordance with GAAP. So we see here that it tells us the company that the financial statements are under, the reporting period, the financial statements that we included. It tells us that we performed in accordance with SSARSs, and that's promulgated by the Accounting Review Services Committee of the AICPA. It makes the disclosure that we didn't audit and aren't providing any level of assurance on these financial statements. Our signature, our city and state, and the date of our accountant's review report. So all these items were noted above in our requirements that we just looked at to be included in the general compilation report. And so in the next several videos, as we look at more non-vanilla, so to speak, compilation report and situations, we can go through each of these additional illustrations to see how we can incorporate the additional requirements.